self-defeating prophecies. And I thought this would be quite appropriate because the United States government is experiencing a self-defeating prophecy in regards to the TikTok ban. So if you're not on TikTok, you might not know that the United States government has passed a law that will result in the social media app TikTok being banned in the United States. So United States users will no longer be able to utilize this app, even though apparently 170 million or so people are utilizing this app. Now, this has many TikTok users unhappy and dismayed, and their reaction has been quite interesting. But Mark Zuckerberg, the owner of Meta, which is TikTok's direct competitor, Instagram, Facebook, apparently spent millions of dollars lobbying amid the writing of the law that will result in the TikTok ban. And the United States government took the position that TikTok, being foreign owned, not being an American company, would be a national security risk because the company that apparently owns it is based in China. So since they don't view China as a friend or an ally, but as an enemy of the United States, they've decided that the app is a national security risk, and they went ahead with that ban. So, of course, right at the moment, it's being argued in the Supreme Court, but it's already scheduled to be deactivated in the United States in a few days. So, very interestingly, the way that TikTok users have responded is by well, they don't want to use Mark Zuckerberg's apps, such as Instagram and Facebook. So many of them have decided to find another Chinese owned social media app and have joined that social media app, even though the Chinese social media app called Red Note is not in English. So many TikTok users, again, are going over to a even more Chinese app that's not in English, where they are actually posting their information, they're sharing their data willingly, and even learning Mandarin Chinese. This is the absolute worst case scenario from the standpoint of Mark Zuckerberg, Meta, and the United States government, because it's everything they didn't want to happen is happening. They said, hey, this app is a national security risk because it's owned by China, so we're going to protect you by getting rid of the app. And the users said, well, we're going to go to an even more Chinese app that doesn't even have English, and we're going to share our data over there now as a result of them imposing this ban. And for Mark Zuckerberg, of course, believing that everyone would then just come to the number 2 competitor of TikTok in the United States. Sadly, people are actually canceling their, what would you call it, accounts on Instagram and Facebook, and even selling their stock, which is causing Meta stock to go down, which is the opposite of what Mark Zuckerberg would have probably wanted or expected through the lobbying that he was apparently involved in to get this to happen. This has become a self-defeating prophecy. So that term, self-defeating prophecy, or ironic process, is when the very thing you don't want to happen is what you cause to be true. It's where the very thing you don't want to happen is what you cause to be true. So you didn't want your daughter to date bad boys, so you made her life really restrictive, and then you didn't let her go out and talk to people, And then, so as a result, she's become more sneaky, more rebellious, and only dates the bad boys and always behind your back. And she lies about it in the process. This is now a self-defeating prophecy. The very thing you didn't want to happen is what you actually caused to happen. So for many trauma survivors, they live in this self-defeating prophecy where they're in a loop over and over again. The very thing that they don't want to happen is what happens to them more because they are living in trauma response. And so I want you to understand this so you know how to defeat self-defeating prophecies and you can live a self-fulfilling prophecy that's positive, that's good, something that's beneficial for you rather than getting stuck in this continual loop of getting the very thing that you fear happening to you again and again, like what's happening to Mark Zuckerberg in the United States government at this particular moment. So, how do we break out of this? Well, what's happening for trauma survivors is they are in fight, flight, fear, and fawn, the four F's. So, whenever they experience something in their life that's dysregulating, gets them upset, or feels scary, they tend to respond in these four F's. These four F's are not bad or evil. Fight, flight, freeze, fawn are survival mechanisms. They allow us to be able to survive extreme circumstances. So imagine if a person were to attack me or my family and I strike out in defense of my family and then I break their nose. This is a violent act on my part. It's not the way I normally would respond. But this isn't a normal situation. The person has now put me in a position where I have to act outside of my normal personality and become violent. This is fight response. And that is actually an adaptive way of responding, meaning that was a healthy response when I struck out, even though it resulted in the destruction of breaking his nose because he was attacking my wife and my children. Does that make sense? So sometimes fight, flight, freeze, and fawn can be good. Sometimes we need to run away from an emergency situation. Sometimes we need to freeze, and sometimes we need to fawn to get through the extreme conditions or situation that we're in. Growing up in your household, I won't judge. You may have needed to learn to fight or to learn flight, self distraction, running away, getting away. You may have learned to freeze, which is dissociation, in order to get through your situations. You may have learned to fawn, which is going to turn out to be people pleasing in the end to get through your situations. And so please don't feel ashamed if you developed a certain trauma response because it's not you, it's the situation that was unreasonable, that put you in a position where you needed to survive. It was the situation that you were in. But what happens is if we develop that in our childhood or due to some narcissistic abuse in our past, and we take that same response out into life and we keep on fight, flighting, and freezing and fawning for everything, we create a cycle of self-defeating prophecies where the very thing we fear, the very thing we hate that triggers us happens more and more. For instance, if a person who has the fight response goes through life always fighting, always getting into conflicts, they become very combative. And as a result of them being a combative person, now anything that they go through that's a dysregulating or anxiety ridden event, they become a fighter and then it creates more conflict so that the conflict just seems to follow them, such as a person who's told by his superiors at work that there's some things he needs to improve on. If he feels triggered by the criticism and he goes into a fight response, he starts yelling back at his boss, telling his boss everything bad that he thinks about his boss and the job and the company. And then what do they say in response to his outbursts? They say, you know what? It doesn't seem like you're happy here. Maybe it would be best if you would leave. And he says, well, fine then, if you're going to fire me or blah, blah, blah. And he leaves. Now he lost his job. But what was the original trigger? Well, he was just being criticized, which is kind of a part of adult life if we're going to work, right? And so because he didn't know how to handle the criticism, he puts himself into a situation where he's more triggered now. The loss of his job may make him feel defensive. So now he's yelling at his wife, right? He's yelling at his children, and he becomes more combative. And he has the same thought in his head that people are trying to attack me. People are trying to attack me. He's getting a self-defeating prophecy. The very thing he fears is what's happening to him more. If someone has flight response, like let's say they're criticizing their relationship or at work as well, but in flight response, they're leaving, they're running away, maybe quitting your job, maybe quitting your relationship, maybe ghosting, maybe packing up everything in the car and running away or running out of the house at an inopportune time because you're in flight response, or maybe you just engage in flight behavior, such as you're stressed about bills, but you do a lot of online shopping to handle your stress. You see the irony in that? That becomes a self-defeating prophecy as well. So by running away from things, what does it cause the people you're running away from to do? Your boyfriends, your bill collectors, your job. It can cause them to sometimes chase you. Now you're being stalked, which is triggering. The very thing that you hate is happening to you more, because instead of communicating properly and walking away, you're ghosting and running away haphazardly. And so it's triggering a self-defeating prophecy. If you're having problems with money, but then you're through flight response are coping by just getting into online shopping, then you're going to have more problems with money as a result of having more problems with money. You keep coping by spending more. See where this is going. It's a self-defeating prophecy. So if someone's in freeze response, they're experiencing the same problem. Someone who freezes dissociates from themselves. So they go into derealization, chronic fantasizing, chronic daydreaming. They zone out for long periods of time. They don't remember what they've been doing, where they've been going. They might drive somewhere and not remember how they got there. Now they're losing parts of their memory. As a result of defaulting to that in your daily life, people feel like you're not paying attention. People feel like you don't care about them if you're in a relationship with them, because you're zoned out all the time. They feel like, oh, if you're not paying attention, then you must not care. And then you lose the people who are closest to you, resulting in more triggering events because you're being abandoned. Or you lose your job or get disciplined at work because you're constantly zoned out, or because you don't pay the bill, but instead you just hide the bill from yourself and hope that it goes away through freeze response. Then the bill collectors add more money onto the bill. The bill was already stressing you out. The bill becomes more. Do you see the self-defeating prophecy? The very thing you didn't want to occur becomes your reality because of your maladaptive trauma response. And it's the same thing for those who fawn. The fawn response is going to be manifest in someone just doing everything and anything to please the other person in order to survive. That might have made sense in childhood when you were helpless to your abusive parents or siblings, but now you are an adult. So if you keep using fawn response through your life, you become what is called a people pleaser. So you're inauthentic, constantly doing whatever it is that you think is going to please the other people. But the problem is you're not being real. You're not being honest. You're not being assertive. You're not being authentic. You're not setting boundaries. And so the people never know you. And if they don't ever truly know who you are and what you need, they can't ever truly please you, be there for you, and connect with you. So therefore, you have no authentic connections in your life as a result of being a people pleaser, which is triggering and causes you to want to please more because you're desperate for the authentic connections. You don't feel connected, but that's because you were inauthentic, you were people pleasing, you were fawn response. It creates a self-defeating prophecy. So how do we break out of this? Right? How do we get out of living in self-defeating prophecy and getting re-triggered back into the same thing that triggered us, into triggering ourselves back in, right? We got to get out of this loop. And there is a way out. That's what I'm going to help you with right now, how to get out of this, right? So first of all, we need to understand at the deepest level, philosophically, why does acting in a trauma response make the thing that you tried to get away from come true? Seems like trauma responses are good, right? Fight, flight, freeze, fawn. It was good in the trauma. When you're going through an extreme situation or you're going through abuse, it was good to take the extreme action. But that's just it. In our daily life, we are no longer going through extreme situations. When your partner criticizes you, it's not an extreme situation. When your boss at work offers some criticism, it's not an extreme situation. When you receive a bill, it's not an extreme situation. Although it may feel that way, this is just normal everyday life situations. And when you respond to normal everyday life situations as if they're extreme, you create a chemical reaction. It's Newton's law. It's something like the third law of something or another, which says that whatever you strike with a force will hit you back with equal force. So if you push your fist against a wall, that fist is going to push you back with that same amount that you hit it against your fist. And when that wall hits your fist, you're going to go, oh. If you're standing on the edge of a boat, and then you lean to the right, the boat will go to the left, and it'll slip out from underneath of you. In the universe, things hit you back with the equal force that you hit them. Things hit you back with the equal force. So when you're misaligned because you're in trauma response, something's hitting you here, and your response is up here somewhere. So what happens when you respond up here? Well, then you get a reaction that's up here. Does that make sense? Your boss criticizes you. Then you crash out. Then they say, okay, well, you lost your job. It becomes extreme because you became extreme. When you froze, that was too extreme for that bill to just ignore it. So as a result, you will get your fine doubled. When you went into flight response and ghosted, now because that was so extreme, that then triggers the other person to stalk you because you never communicated. So they start going through other means to try to figure out and find you and figure out where you are, and they're looking for you now. But none of this would have to happen if you had just sat down and communicated. You see, you're getting hit with the equal reaction to what you are putting out, to how you're responding to your universe. So we have to learn to respond in the 4 Ds of the healed response instead of the 4 Fs, right? So instead of fight response, what would be the D for that? Well, discussion. It brings us down a notch. Instead of fighting, we need the skill of being able to discuss whatever it is that's an actual issue. Instead of the flight response, then what do we use? Disconnection. We need the ability to emotionally disconnect from a person or even physically disconnect, but with calmness and confidence and communication, with the proper amount of thinking and deliberation before just disappearing, running away, ghosting, or distracting ourselves overly much. We're not going to be extreme. We're going to be well measured. We're going to be healed. These are the 4 Ds of the healed response. So instead of freeze response, we're going to take a moment, but we're just going to deliberate. Deliberation is taking time to think, to pause and to think. That's deliberation, to pause and to think. That's what we need to do in a situation where we receive that bill or someone's getting upset with us, these are normal everyday life situations. If we go up here, then we're going to get responses that are up there, and extreme situations will happen to us in our life, which will be extremely triggering, which will put us back in that self-defeating prophecy. So instead, we're in the 4 Ds of the healed response: deliberation rather than freeze. And instead of fawn, we're just going to be deferential. Deference is the skill of showing respect, honor, or consideration for the other person. This might be a better response when we're given criticism by our boss at work or even our spouse. To go into deference is to say, okay, I see you. I hear you. I respect you. I care about what you're saying. I'm going to apply this criticism. I'm going to take it to heart. That's deference. I didn't go as far as to fawn and say, I have no boundaries, I have no rules, whatever everyone else says, too much. But we do need some deference, right? And so you'll notice the 4 Ds are all a more healed, more measured, more muted, less extreme response to life. And that's how we get through without creating a self-defeating prophecy over and over again. Did you catch what the 4 Ds were? We got discussion, disconnection, deliberation, and deference. To discuss your skills of being able to communicate about the issue, to assert yourself, but to listen as well. To disconnect, your ability to be able to let go of a relationship connection, to put space between you and the other person, not to be controlled by them anymore. Deliberation is your ability to pause and to think, to meditate. And deference is to show respect, consideration to another person. Does that make sense? This is how we move through in a measured way. We don't have then self-fulfilling prophecies because we're not doing something extreme. It doesn't cause others to do something extreme. And that's what happened to the US government. I don't mean to criticize them, but they made a decision to do something that was kind of extreme. The American people have never had a media source taken away from them because of what? The idea that another country is going to influence them or have access to their information. It has never happened before. It's unprecedented. So by taking an unprecedented action, it came off to the American people, especially TikTok users, as being extreme. And so they went to another extreme response as a result. And now they're on an even more Chinese app. And I have a feeling they can keep this going as the government has to keep pouncing on the next Chinese app and the next Chinese app as the American people just keep on bouncing to the next one and the next one. So something will have to give here, and something will give. Something will give, because at this point, this is not healthy at all. But we have to remember this when we're raising our children, not to think that cracking down in the extreme. You're grounded for 1 month. You're grounded till graduation. All the extreme responses, hitting, taking away too much freedom, it just causes the opposite reaction. Children of strict parents become secretive children. When you're overly strict, cause your children to feel like they can't talk to you, they can't share with you, and they don't. If you overreact to things your children tell you, they're not going to tell you what they're doing. And if you take away their device for too long, they're going to sneak and get their device back or get another device from someone else. Try to control what they're going to wear, and they're going to go and borrow their clothes from their friends. That's life, right? That's what happens as a parent. Why? Because you're creating a self-defeating prophecy. The very thing you try to control your child to not do, It's the very thing child's going to just do. I know for me as a kid, I was probably was the worst. I couldn't be controlled at all. And I remember my parents telling me, they're like, they said something like, "You're difficult to discipline because we don't know what you want." Like we don't know what to take away from you. Like you don't seem to be into video games or anything like because for me, if you say go to your room, it's like, yes, I love it there. Hey, you can't go out with your friends. That's fine. I like the peace and quiet, the silence. You understand? So I was they're like you're kind of a difficult kid. We don't know what we can really do that's gonna I noticed the power of that when I was 12 years old. I think was I 12 or maybe younger? But yeah, they started. I did this thing. It was so I don't encourage kids to do it, but I would shrug my shoulders like that. That was so mean to do that to my parents. But they would be like, "Go to your room," and I'd go. It just gets under their skin, you know. But that was how I found my power in an opposite reaction. You're not going to be able to control me because I'm going to take away that sense or that feeling like there's anything you can do to bother me. And I still have that same sense, that same strand of rebellion. I promise to be happy whether I'm in prison or I'm in a mansion. I'm going to be happy either way, and that's a choice. And in that way, I create a beautiful self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm going to be happy either way by going through life believing that people are loving, you will find that people are loving. If you go through life believing that you are strong, you will find that you are strong. If you believe that nothing can stop you, then you will find that you are quite unstoppable. If you believe that you are beautiful, then you will find that you are quite beautiful. You are creating a beautiful self-fulfilling prophecy that is healthy. So pick a belief based on what you actually want to experience in your life. I don't know about you, but I believe I will be wildly successful and make an impact on the world. Why? Is that because that's really what's going to happen? Not inherently. I need you to understand there's a nice, comfortable couch right there. I have a subscription to Netflix. I can just sit on the couch and just watch my subscriptions until my money runs out. I don't have to be successful and change the world. There's nothing that makes me have to do that, but it's a choice. Because if I look at my life and I just say, well, I'm here anyway, so why not utilize my gifts, talents, abilities, my resources to produce something that's good, not only for me, but for others as well? It's beneficial all the way around. It's motivated by love. You can do the same thing. Of course, I know it's easier to just ball up and be small, but you can sit down and use your consciousness, your gift of free choice and free will, and make a decision to do something that's going to be beneficial for you, to get involved in a project that's going to be beneficial for you and subsequently for others simultaneously, something that's going to help people, something that's going to support others. You can make that decision. And I implore you to do just that. And as a result of keeping a positive mindset and being in your personal power, focusing on what you control, you will find that what you believe, you will see. And those prophecies will come true.